Hey everybody, welcome back to Hard for Games. I'm Tony.
I'm Richie.
Today we're going to be talking about the GameCube NR Reader. It is a development unit for the GameCube.
And a rather pretty one at that. I kind of like the color there.
It's kind of like this nice dark teal.
Yeah.
For some reason, the development GameCube hardware had gorgeous coloring.
Yeah, there's a whole rainbow of development GameCubes, but just black and purplish for the release in America.
Yeah, and then there's the one that's like sort of like an orange spice color. That's really cool, but only released in Japan.
Of course.
Which,
of
par
course.
for the course. Either way, you may remember this from our NR Disc Wind Waker episode, where we utilized this device to determine whether or not a Zelda Wind Waker disc that had been floating around was a beta or not, because supposedly it was, but actually it was a big old fake. However, today we're going to be diving more so into what this unit is hardware-wise, and what makes it different from a regular GameCube.
Mainly not reading barcodes.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into the NR Reader.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not as familiar with this stuff as you are, Tony, because you've been dealing with the folks,
The pain.
talking to all the people, getting your stuff together, but this is really the first time I've seen this one. I wasn't there for the Zelda episode, and all I can really see that's different is this region switch. We've got USA, Japan, and then it says down here that it's an NR reader. But what is actually different between this and a retail GameCube?
Well, great question, Richie. As a matter of fact, Richie did point out the region switch. There is a version that is a PAL version of an NR reader. I don't think that version has the switch, because both Japan and USA are NTSC, and it probably is easier to swap between them. But that does exist. It is out there somewhere. So, you know, on this channel, we've talked about various GameCube development items, right? Now, before this, we've talked about the NPDP reader and the Dolphin GDEV, which essentially both utilize these NPDP cartridges, which were hard drives in a cartridge that you'd shove into the unit. They could hold up to 4 different GameCube games, and of course, they were utilized for development and debugging and all of those things.
And for like a in-house piece of tech that makes perfect sense, because I mean, you can reuse the hard drive, you can. Because, I mean, you're going to be building and rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding.
Yeah.
I get the feeling, since this is actually using discs, that it's for stuff that's closer to release.
And that's the feeling I got as well. Or if you're outside of development, you know, let's say you're a reviewer, or it's a trade show, or maybe you just are getting toward the end and you want to make sure it's running properly on the disc with the load times and all of those things. And NR Reader is probably what you would utilize. But the big difference between this and a regular GameCube, retail GameCube, is that the media is incompatible, and vice versa. Essentially, all GameCube discs have a digital barcode on them that the GameCube recognizes, and then it plays. NR discs are missing that barcode. So if you pop an NR disc into a regular retail GameCube, it says, well, where the hell is the barcode? I don't recognize this, I'm not going to play it. And vice versa. You pop a retail disc into this, it has a barcode, and it doesn't recognize it. So
it's like blood types.
Yes, exactly. If I were to just bleed into you, you might die, and vice versa.
I don't even know my blood type.
I aced my blood type test. I had to find out when Anna got pregnant. A+.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good. So you've got a barcode on your blood.
Yes.
If you were O negative, you wouldn't.
No. That's right.
So that's really what an NR is.
Yeah. So to answer your question, it's the drive that's different. And essentially, aside from that, it's the same.
And basically, it seems like the whole purpose here is so that you can have like a portable delivery system for games without having to worry about it getting misfiled and finding its way into retail hands.
Yes, exactly, because they're incompatible. As is the case often with Nintendo development content and hardware. So let's talk a little bit about the discs themselves. You know, they look kind of like standard GameCube discs in terms of the size. They're that mini DVD. They're purple on the back, so you can see that they're very burnable. And we have a couple here. We have a blank one. We have a couple review copies. And we also have a beta version of a game.
And they also say on here, this disc can only be used with NR Reader. And it took Tony about 10 minutes to explain that point to me, and Nintendo accomplished it in a sentence. So great job.
It's a reason why I'm just a man and they are a god. And, you know, these discs are also known as .-003. And I know that because all of the discs say .-003. And
very nice.
I read it on the internet.
The internet is always right.
100% always right. We talked about the digital barcode, right? And that comes into play when you actually want to dump and preserve NR discs, right? Because there's actually a very limited line of old school, early 2000s era DVD-ROMs that can dump GameCube NR discs. But the problem with it is that you have to not only find this really obscure like DVD-ROM, but you also have to dismantle it because you have to pop in a regular GameCube disc. You have to let it read and recognize the barcode. Then you need to hot swap it out while it's still spinning and pop in the NR disc. And the thing is that the first time I did this with the Zelda beta fake, I could just press the top and it would just come to a slow stop. It doesn't do that anymore for me. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I have to like, it's spinning on my fingers. I have to lift it up, swap it, it's going, and like pop this thing back on, make sure it's lined up, and then begin a dump, right?
Yeah, but you know, I have some experience hot swapping discs from the Final Fantasy PlayStation era, because for Final Fantasy IX, you had to kind of trick the system into skipping the cutscenes by pulling the disc out and then plopping it back in so that you could beat the game faster and get some of the time-sensitive content in the game. So I think I need to give this a shot.
Let's see if you're as good as you say you are. I'll teach you first, and then you can try it.
All right.
Cheers.
I should probably drink first. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's a little harder than I thought. Oh, geez. The bottom came off. I'm an expert here, okay? See? Now I'm just going to go in. Oh, my goodness! Oh, this is insane!
I did want to have a segment cautioning everybody if they are planning on purchasing NR discs. And the reason being is because so long as you have the proper equipment, specifically an NR writer, you can write as many NR discs as you want. So it can be difficult to tell whether or not you're purchasing something that is legitimate from a developer, or if someone just slapped a retail version on a disc and burned it and wrote review and sold it to you for a couple $100. So it is something that you should be looking out for. There are a couple different ways to tell. Now, firstly, before the purchase, you want to make sure that you're working with someone who's reputable. You know, i.e. they have a good reputation in the community, they're known for being on the up and up.
Not this guy.
Not Richie. Don't buy from Richie. Don't buy from Richie. But
NR actually stands for not Richie.
Once you actually have an NR disc, and let's say you do end up getting it dumped, or if you need it dumped, we can talk about it. We can help you out with it. There are a couple things to look for. On first-party games, there's something called a copy date. And the copy date is like a .text file, and it says the exact time down to the second that particular build was created. And that's one of the many ways we figured out that the Zelda Wind Waker beta was in fact fake, because it had the exact same copy date as the retail version.
Yep.
That was the big red flag. And then there are a bunch of other little red flags. It gets a little more complicated with third-party stuff, though, because they don't always follow the same protocol. So
Nintendo is kind of anal.
Yes.
Just a little bit.
Just this much. But, so for example, on the T3 Terminator 3 GameCube disc that we have, there's no copy date, but there's a file called release date. And it matches between the retail and the NR version. Also, there's just other things when you look at it in a hex editor that basically point to it being the same version. So for example, if you're taking a look at in a hex editor and the Dolphin SDK, i.e. the software development kit, is the same version from the retail to the beta version, is not necessarily a definitive way to determine that it is in fact the same, but if they're different, it's much more likely that the game is an earlier version.
Right.
So it's like, it could go one way, it could mean or it could go the other way, and it could really be an arrow pointing in that direction.
These are all good tips, because I would just stick the thing in a GameCube and see if it boots up. If it boots in a GameCube, it's not legit.
Yeah. Well, you know, if it's burned onto an NR disc. You know, another thing too, of course, is to just play it and see if there are any differences, but that is much more tedious than dumping it and
doing a quick look at the code versus trying to actually like play a game like a game tester would and see what you can break.
Yeah, because a lot of people send us stuff and they're like, you know, do you know if there's any differences? And you got to go to the code, you know. And if I can't do it, which often I can't, I'll go to trusted partners that we have to take a look at it for us. But it is a lot of work to go bit by bit in a game that you've never played before to find differences. Tell you that much. So we actually did find an NR disc that had a beta version of a game. Finally. Yes! It was WWE Day of Reckoning 2. You know what's actually strange about this Day of Reckoning 2 is that it is actually recognized by the Dolphin emulator as PAL, but it reads in this. Now there were some games that were developed for PAL, but only are readable on NTSC US NR readers. So it's sort of this weird...
It's just weird.
It's just weird. Now, first things first, the game had a different game ID than the retail release, which is a big sign that it's different. When you open it up in a hex editor, the first thing that pops up is the game ID, and you can just instantly tell that it's something a little bit different. Secondarily, the SDK, again, the software development kit, is the same as Day of Reckoning 1, but earlier than the retail version of Day of Reckoning 2.
Huh.
So they were kind of going off of the first one, literally building off of the first one to make the second one, then ultimately switched over. When you open up the file in a hex editor, this particular one that's running right now rarely references itself as Day of Reckoning 2. It almost exclusively references itself as Day of Reckoning 1. The retail version does the exact opposite. It almost exclusively references itself as Day of Reckoning 2. Right, so again, building off of the first one. Lastly, once it was dumped, I loaded it into the Dolphin emulator, you know, the emulator that anyone can utilize to play GameCube games. The thumbnail and the name that it understood from the ISO was Day of Reckoning, not number 2. So essentially, all the things in terms of its name had pointed to Day of Reckoning, even though it was actually Day of Reckoning 2. I know I've said Day of Reckoning like 1,000 freaking times. It's kind of a convoluted explanation, but it is what it is.
But now this is Tony's Day of Reckoning, because as it turns out, this is actually just Day of Reckoning 1, and they swatched out the splash screen.
I'm sorry about your hand.
It's so sad. At least I have one still, though.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for watching, and a huge thank you to Andrew, who lent us, among many other things over the years, all of the NR discs that you saw today. Cheers to you, sir. And cheers to all of you out in the audience for watching, liking, subbing, ringing that bell, all that stuff that YouTube forces us to do and say these days because it's a dying medium.
But this time we have something extra important for you to do. If you could go ahead and donate to the Repair Richie's Hand Fund.
Yes.
That would be so great.
Yes. Just sort of nature of the beast, casualties of war.
You got to be willing to do the dirty work in this business.
That's right. By the way, you owe me for the drive that you broke because of the blood splatter.
Yeah, I'll charge it to the insurance. Medical insurance, of course. Of course. Because that's a medical problem.
Of course.
Insurance fraud.
Thank you again for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and a share, and we will see you guys next time.